Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'll be taking a look at this edition from the Fantagraphics EC library, Grave Business and Other Stories, illustrated by Graham Ingles. Graham Ingles is definitely one of the guys that when I look at the old EC stuff, his art really appeals to me. So I was happy to grab this pretty much a year ago now in last year's Fanabucks sale. I've been going through these pretty slowly because these stories, especially these Feldstein written ones, if you've seen my other videos, I just don't like his writing style. I don't like how he over explains things in the captions. I don't like how just kind of cheesy the endings are, how like predictable these things are, kind of how repetitive it all feels. But there's so much good going on in the art. So I try to read these, but I got a few in and I just had to kind of flip through and look at the art. So like with any of these historical things, I've said it before, I'm more of a futurist, interested in where comics are going than where they've been. My interest in looking at art is always just for the quality of the art itself, and then trying to kind of see who influenced who. But because I'm not a great historian, I of course don't know who's all working when and at what time and how that all lines up. So a lot of what I was looking at in this book, I could see the influences. Like, I don't know, I'm assuming Wrightson was kind of working around at the same time. But seeing a lot of the influences going forward, there was a lot of artists that make sense to me in like the rendering techniques that Graham Ingles uses, some of the distortions that he uses. That's all really interesting. Like, this to me is just such a great bit of rendering throughout. I can see like the Kevin Nowlin type of line in there. I can see, I don't know, there's just a whole obviously lineage of artists that grew out of this stuff in many different ways, and that's all appealing to me. So anyone who can tell me like who Ingles was looking at to get to where he got as an artist would be interesting, because it is realistic and it does fit within a certain lineage in that terms. But what I'm seeing in terms of the marks, the way the figures look, it doesn't really seem related to any of the other like realists. Maybe a bit of Kniff with like the fineness of Raymond Line, but it just seems like such a different thing. It's hard to stack it in either of those lineages. So it feels to me like Ingles is kind of off from the stuff I've looked at, off in his own world. I also looked at, I don't normally do this, but I was looking at the like essay in the back, and they were talking about Ingles as being kind of an out of nowhere guy, that mysterious figure that disappeared at some point. So the essay here didn't really give me much. So if anyone has like kind of a who Ingles's precedence would have been, who his influence has been, that would be interesting to me. One of the things I noticed throughout the book is how fun his fat faces are. He seems to have like one model maybe that he's using for his fat faces, or like I don't know if he's making all this stuff up or if he's photographing people, but there's something he's modeling these faces on, and they're so genuinely expressive within their like cartoony expressions within the realism. I find that really impressive and really particularly like that face there. This is apropos of nothing, but I was reading this at the same time I was finishing up the fantastic HBO series by my favorite TV producer and writer of all time, David Simon, The Deuce, and there's a character in there named Laurie Madison, and I swear to God, this is just like a trace of that actress's face. So that was a little strange to see what to me looks like a photo reference of someone I'm familiar with from today in an old strip. But again, that's suggesting to me that at least to some extent, Ingles was using some photo reference, but I don't think I'm seeing that like in everything. He obviously had a pretty wild imagination as well. One of the most interesting things to me was to see when he starts using a lot of these dry brush techniques. I think they're used very beautifully in his work. And combining that with how fine his lines get versus how thick a lot of the other, you have these big, thick kind of Kniff applications with these really fine parallel hatching that you would get from like Raymond, but they're being used like to it just in a really different feel. And then combining that with some of the more textural stuff is really interesting. Unfortunately, and this is, I think in a couple past videos, people have not heard exactly what I was saying. It's unfortunate because even though Fantagraphics does as good of a job as they could on the reproduction, I'm not knocking Fantagraphic for poor reproduction. It's just a fact of history that we've lost access to the best resources, which is the original art. And so Fantagraphics is obviously getting the best resources they can for most of this. But a lot of the subtleties, I think, of some of the textural work that he's doing, some of the finer lines appear to be getting lost. And that in general makes these collections hard for me to buy because the stories definitely aren't compelling enough to interest me. And even though I like the artists, I feel like this isn't something I pick back up and just flip through for the pure visual pleasure of the art very much, because to my eyes, not all of it, like this page that I'm looking at looks particularly well reproduced. The lines aren't too filled in, but there's still a lot of loss in the line, and it's just not a pleasant visual experience for me because I've just seen what I'm not seeing on a lot of the pages. So it makes these EC volumes hard. And again, that's not a knock on Fantagraphics or anyone else who's done it. It's just I should probably just be buying like the EC artist editions where they actually have access to the original art. But even those, all of them that I've seen, they don't really, I can still see the pixels and stuff. They're not sharpening the art as much as they should be. So I don't know, maybe the best thing for me to do is just to stick to heritage auctions and looking around online. But anyways, this one, this page is particularly well reproduced, and also looks like he's got some kind of stamping, textural stamping that he's doing on this building, where maybe he got some ink on like a sponge or something and kind of dabbed at it. And that's not something I think I've seen in a lot of the other work in these EC guys. They tend to be brush and pen artists, and to see someone getting a little wilder with the dry brush and the textures is really fun. Pages like this, where you get these really nasty techniques, this obviously had to be, besides the grotesqueness of the faces and how good Ingles is at drawing the witch character, the crone, this had to be the kind of stuff that was totally influencing people. So like this and Bernie Wrightson, obviously, then you're getting like your Kelly Joneses, and there's a couple other guys, Kyle Hotz and those type of people. I also, for some strange reason, kept going back to this artist that worked a lot with Warren Ellis back in the day named Mike Wolfer. So it's interesting to see that the people that persisted on in like the horror genres were really drawn to a certain type of mark, like these feathered lines, this parallel hatching that's going on. Obviously, you get like Totleben and Bissett kind of stuff coming out of this lineage as well. Something about that makes everything feel kind of gross and ragged, extra goopy and three-dimensional. And there's just like even though it's beautiful stuff, there's like an ickiness about how dark some of the lines get compared to the others. And you can see that they picked up on all of these things going forward, and other artists have leveraged them to great effect. Some more really cool like dry brush stuff going on in here. Some really beautiful swampy textures. All that the mark making that I was just talking about lends itself really well to like wet shrubbery and gross things like that. So again, you see that like building the language of horror comics with this stuff. Really also enjoy this trick in this panel here where you have the dead body that's obviously not moving, and then you have two panels behind it. Just really beautiful, imaginative layouts, kind of formally tricky stuff. So really appreciating a lot in this, but again, held back by the storytelling. This is another one where you get like this type of long, thin, feathered mark that becomes like associated with Wrightson and Ingles, then going into people like Charles Burns and artists like that. That's what I enjoy most about looking at these. I think this in particular is a really stunning image with this pumpkin, all the texture work here on the stump. his drawings of trees and environment are really my favorite things. Here's another one, and I could have had any number of these throughout the book where it's like it feels like that same model that he's using for like his fat face. I wonder if some of this was like when I looked up Bill Gaines, some of it kind of looked like him. So I was wondering if they were looking at that. I don't know. I feel like there's someone in particular he's using. And this is another one of those illustrations that reminded me of like the Mike Wolfer guy. And a lot of the artists that work for that same company, Avatar, seem to have like this more interest in the grotesque style that is coming out of here. And just, yeah, the fat, like overly, like the lips and everything on them are so nasty. Here's the one where I see like a Charles Burns. When I was doing the Ditko review, I thought this was in the Ditko book. Now I'm realizing it's here. This one with that like side lighting on both sides, even just that as a lighting technique seems like something that got picked up and almost turned into a whole style. It's really fun to see, and this I do this with music too, like where you can tell that a band made a song and then another band thought that song was so great and like, oh, I wish their whole style was like that. I feel like looking at a lot of these older artists, I'll find instances of that in panels where it's like someone just obsessed over that drawing and was like, I got to make a whole style where everything's like triple lit like that, double lit like that. Those things are fun to see. And again, I'm not such a historian, but I could see why people would get really into tracking all that. It would be fun to see a tree. I'm sure someone online has like a tree of how all this stuff interrelates, but that's the most fun thing for me going back to these. And as I'm starting to push my own art away from the black and white pen and ink realistic stuff that I was engaged in for so long, and I guess I got out of my system with Strange Death. Like the learning aspects from these isn't so great for me as it is in looking at what people who are working today who play with shape and color are doing. But it's still beautiful stuff to look at. And then this face in particular, I love this. I came to this face. First off, it looks like great political cartooning. This guy has to be a politician. Again, I didn't read these, but he looks like this is Mitch McConnell. That's who that is. But I looked at this and I thought, God, this guy looks like such a fucking pervert. Like he looks like he's jerking off the kiddie porn or something. And then I looked up at the caption and saw that it said sheer ecstasy. So I'm sure I caught that in my periphery, but just flipping through the book, I was flipping through, looking at it like at about a pace like this, just taking in each panel and moving on. That image immediately caught me, and I immediately knew how lecherous and awful of an expression that was, even better than this one. And to me, that and the environmental stuff, obviously the chrome that he's so famous for, shows why Graham Ingels is so well regarded. So I'm definitely going to be going online and trying to get myself some nice high resolution images of his art, because I've become, Strange Death made me so eagle-eyed, laser-eyed particular about print quality that I know hardly anyone else cares about. That these things, they're the best they could do, but they're not as good as the art could look in these books. And I really just want to appreciate someone of this skill level. Look at that. There's George W. Bush right there too. He really predicted the future. We got Mitch McConnell. We got W over here. There's just, that's kind of a W looking face too. These guys, I think, I really need to see the originals as they exist to fully appreciate it. So I'll probably be building a folder on my computer. A lot of these artists, I think, given my particular requirements of how well stuff needs to be reproduced for me to be able to enjoy it, I don't know that I'll be buying any more of these EC ones. Again, not on Fantagraphics shoulders. They've made them look as good as they can. It's just a real bummer that so much of this stuff has been lost to history, and that so many readers think like, what are you complaining about, because they've never seen it done the right way, and that they can't. And I know, as an artist who spends a lot of time on this too, I just developed it. But it's just tragic to me that people put so much work into this, and then there's issues with people seeing the full scope of their genius. So I'm very grateful to have these, very grateful that it made me take a deeper look at these artists, and learning a lot. But anything anyone has to tell me about who influenced who from here, especially leading up to Graham Ingles, I would very much appreciate. The Eisner nominated The Strange Death of Alex Raymond by Dave Sim and myself. This is a gorgeously illustrated and designed book, Dave doing most of the illustration. Amazing compositions throughout. What Dave is doing is he's recording his obsession with the death of master cartoonist Alex Raymond behind the wheel of Stan Drake's car when they got into a car crash. The best description of the book that I've heard is that it's like understanding comics with pages like this, mixed with something like From Hell, when you get into the theories about what actually happened with the car crash. And then with Sean on production, it's just one of the most gorgeously printed books you could get a hold of.